Serious issue going on right now with people in general who work jobs, particularly younger people, particularly younger men, but all of us in general, where nobody wants to work anymore, right? And we got to assess, why is this? We can't just write people off and say they're lazy or they're just demotivated and they need to get their act together and pull themselves up by the bootstraps, like a Ben Shapiro might say, right? There are lots of real issues why people are kind of demotivated from working. And we're going to assess some of that in this video here.
I feel so disillusioned with the economy and my job now. I'm so over it. Like, I hate my freaking job. I hate the people I work with. It's all like a fake kind of political game where we all have to act like we like each other. But I can't stand them. All they care about is money. All they care about is maximizing their paycheck. And I feel like they treat the younger people at the office, like the older people especially, it's this weird power dynamic where like...
So, what do we have here, right? So this is interesting. We have a white American man who's in Gen Z, so in his early mid-20s, I would estimate. And it really does echo a lot of the kind of commentary I've provided in some of my videos, right? You're at work, you don't really like people, everyone has to be extra fake nice, play this fake political game, and you might even hate your co-workers, hate your managers, and there's a growing disparity between those baby boomer generation people, or I would say people generally over 40 who might have their finances together, might have their stable, high-paying job, compared to the younger people who can't even get on the property ladder, can't even afford to, do some social activities given their salary is so low and the inflation has particularly picked up in the last few years. So you have all these like underlying passive aggressive tension between different groups, between generations, between genders, between different political ideologies. And this very weird power dynamic that goes on at work. So it's understandable why people don't want to work anymore. So that's reason number one, right? Lots of social tension, lots of socioeconomic tension there. And then also you have this weird power dynamic that is going on in the office right now where it doesn't feel like a fair game in terms of a fair trade-off of time for money, given the rate of inflation, given the salaries are quite low. You have this dynamic where the company you're working for is almost like playing God with your life, with your time, with your earning potential, given, like salaries are not keeping up with the rate of inflation, with the way you dress, things like that. And it can become quite demoralizing. It can become quite annoying. And that's what you end up having, is you end up having people who drag themselves to work every day, kind of hate their life, and they go through the motions every day, and they end up doing a couple of things. They might be dropping out and becoming unemployed. They might live with their parents in that case. They might just try and just find any alternative to avoid having a job. And there's many options there, and I try to help people through my career coaching program. If you're interested, there's a link in the description, to look through some of the alternatives. There might be remote working from home, developing a different skill set, becoming a freelancer, looking at your budgeting and your investing and your saving. There's different options to expedite that process to reach your financial freedom. Like I say, if you're saving and investing a lot and you're intending on living on a low cost of living area, maybe in your country, in another country, living off grid, things like that, combining some of these and some of your skill sets, you can help push towards developing your freedom quicker than working at a company for the rest of your life. Now, these are all things to consider as to why people don't want to work anymore. People are looking for the alternative more than they are looking to work, right? Because it feels like an unfair transaction. You're working just to live.
I feel like the relationship between the worker and the employers now is like breached beyond repair. Especially if you're disillusioned to like the retirement dream that all the boomers had. I've done enough research and I've listened to enough like YouTubers and podcasts to realize we're not getting Social Security. The debt is just insane right now at the US, and we're kind of the generation that, if it's going to happen non-violently, we're going to be the ones that have to kind of dig out of that. And it just makes you...
And there's a key point he said at the end there, right? Which I'll just say is, is there a peaceful solution to the current socioeconomic conditions in the West? And I would say most likely not, but we're going to hope for peace. We're going to hope for a peaceful solution between rebuilding the social contract between the government and the citizens, between the companies and the employers. Hopefully everything works out. But the truth is the social contract's completely broken, particularly between company and employee, which is what I'm focusing on here, right? People are like, oh, cool, so I'm working hard, don't really have a community or family. Maybe many people can't afford to buy a property. They're working for a company where they're apparently saving for a retirement or contributing to their retirement, but it seems like that retirement's never going to come because the retirement age keeps getting extended. The truth is the stock market would have to stay in a perpetual bubble for decades and decades, which it could do, to maintain your pensions, right? Because pensions, how is a pension fund maintained? It's maintained through investing in the stock market. And that's why you see quite an inflated stock market, because you can see so many people getting their money invested through their pension investing scheme into the stock market, which can't really justify some of the highs you can see, right? That's why there's a complete disconnect between most people, particularly the middle class, suffering financially, but the stock market's reaching all-time highs because there's a complete disconnect there. So stock market's in a bubble, which means the pension funds are in a bubble, and the likelihood that you might have a significant pension when you're older is unlikely. I think what you might have is like people who work hard their whole life, maybe can't afford to buy or do anything productive in terms of having a lot of time for their family or community. A lot of people will develop bad habits, and they might end up getting fed up with their job and end up picking up a drinking habit or smoking, or you have all these mental health issues that we keep hearing about because people don't have the basics that would create a fulfilling life, because their life is consumed with work and stress about their finances. So what ends up happening is people get demotivated, they get taken advantage of with wasted tax money, billions of dollars to conflicts overseas. As you see, if you're in the UK or America, you see how much of your tax money is going to conflicts on another part of the world that has nothing to do with you. So it creates quite a difficult situation for many people. So let's continue to listen here.
On meth, and it's like, what the fuck happened to helping out me? What about the people that just work a 9 to 5, want to have a family, own a house, live a normal fucking life, and like we don't get shit? We're the real suckers actually at the end of the day. The people that put in a hard day's work are the suckers, because we're the ones that get shafted. We have to pay exorbitant taxes, and the taxes don't go into any sort of public services that help us out. They just funnel straight overseas, they funnel straight into political people's hands, and they funnel to places that are never going to actually like return on our investment. And it's just super frustrating. I'm so over it. Like, I hate my boss, I hate my government. I feel like it's almost not even worth it. It's almost just worth it to drop out, save a little money, go enjoy the simple things of life, living out in some van somewhere, enjoying nature, having my free time.
So if you work a 9 to 5, you are neglected as a loser by this system. The system is looting you of your money, taking 40% of your income in the form of taxes, either through income tax, through your taxes on sales tax when it comes to buying food and clothing and things like that. Those are taxed. And the system is taking all that money and saying, okay, well, you're worthless to us. We don't care if you can't afford to buy a house, can't afford to have a family, stuck in a dead-end job, or have a job where there's lack of career progression because the more senior, higher-paying roles are taken up by one demographic or the other, the woke culture, the liberals, or taken up by baby boomer generations or whatever DEI hire that might be there. So you're dealing with all of that, and then it ends up creating a scenario where people are like, oh, crap, well, what am I working for? You're treated like a loser. And that's what you see when you walk around. And leave a comment below and let me know what you think. I think when you walk around this society, there are some people who are doing financially well. Maybe if you go to a more affluent area. I've seen in London, for example, near some of the more wealthy apartments, I see people super chill, relaxing, have a lot of their money invested in this inflated stock market, and they're probably all-time high net worths, given they've invested in the stock market in previous decades, and stock markets at a record high, property prices at record high. So if you invested in assets, you're fine. But most people who are workers and who are investing now or saving their money now, they walk around kind of dejected and disillusioned. It feels like you have a very split divide in this society. So leave me a note in the comments. What is the general vibe you get from people? Because even in a grocery store, they might be walking around the grocery store and they're looking carefully at the prices because everything's overpriced. They might be walking around outside in like parks and things like that. And the general vibe is like depression or like a lack of progress. Like, what am I doing here? Where am I going? And the system is treating you. The system is treating you like a second-class citizen. And I summarized it in this way. This system wants you to be a high-skilled, minimalist, isolated, financial samurai. So let's go through this. The system wants you to be highly skilled because the only high-paying jobs now require very high skills, right? In terms of finances and tech, finance, tech, healthcare, becoming a doctor, a lawyer, high-skilled accountant, things like that. That's what the high-paying jobs are. You have to be high-skilled, but you also have to be comfortable with the fact that you might be fired at any moment because there's layoffs in some of these high-paying jobs. So you have to be a minimalist too. And not only do you have to be a minimalist, you also have to take into account, for many people, affording to buy a house or maybe having a family and kids could be a massive risk or massive debt they take on for the mortgage, or having kids can be quite pricey if you're living in certain areas of the West. So then they want you to kind of be isolated, because you can obviously do those things, but the system kind of pushes you in the direction of isolation in terms of a lack of community, a lack of family, things like that. So you got to be high skilled, you got to be a minimalist, you got to be saving and investing a lot because you could lose your job at any time, even if it's a high paying job. You got to be somewhat isolated, maybe, like I say, of deciding not to have a family in terms of a wife and kids, or you might be isolated because you have to work in a location away from your immediate or extended family. You might have to be isolated because you're not allowed to express certain political opinions publicly. You got a lot of cancel culture. You have to be always on edge as an individual. When could you be cancelled and cut out of society or from your job for having the wrong opinion? Then you have to be a financial samurai. And what do I mean by that? You need to be good at investing, because if you want to beat the inflation rate, you need to be going, okay, cool, what can I invest in? Shall I invest in the S&P, gold, Bitcoin? What are the other options there? Which particular sector is doing well? I need to invest my money. I can't put it in a higher interest rate savings account, because if you're getting 4% on a savings account, that is not keeping up with the 10 to 30% rate of inflation, because the central bank is printing a lot of money. Then you have to kind of be a samurai. And when I mean samurai, you've got to be able to defend yourself because the crime rate is going up significantly. So in a peaceful way, whatever permitted by the law of the country you're in, you have to be able to defend yourself as a samurai. But also you have to have this kind of samurai, Japanese monk kind of Buddha detachment from society, or detachment from the craziness of the political system, the economy, the social dynamics getting messed up, right? Because of woke culture, or whatever you want to call cancel culture, things like that. So you have to be high skilled, minimalist, isolated, financial samurai. That's what this system is expecting of you, and expecting of young people, particularly young men, or just people in general, middle class, things like that, right? So it's expecting too much, because this system is setting up all these traps for you. Or you go to college and you go to university and you get a lot of student loan debt, then you're going to have to work a job that pays a lot, but you might not find that. So then you'll be stuck in a debt trap of quite high loans or student loans hanging over your head, right? Sure, so you haven't got that sorted. So that's one trap they set for you. Another trap is if you're a man and you get married, the rate of divorce is 50%, and 70% of divorces are initiated by women in the West or in America, right? I don't have the exact statistics. Then there's another trap that could backfire, and then you could have child support, divorce, and alimony payments to make, right? And expensive legal fees that could wipe you out financially. And that's a simple thing like getting married and having kids. You could go work for a company, someone could falsely accuse you of something, you could deal with a layoff out of nowhere, you're working hard and they make some job cuts. This system is set up so many traps for you, right? Or you could invest in something, it looks like a stable investment, but it turns out they lied to you and the stock market crashes and you lose 30% of your net worth. So it's like, okay, cool, I've got to tiptoe around life, what I say, what I do, how I manage my finances, how I manage my time. Any time the system could pull the rug from up under you and rug pull your life. So it's a bit too much to expect from people. So let's continue to listen about how bad things are getting out there.
Talk to my 50-year-old lady that freaking tries to micromanage me and tell me to keep that attitude up because like the clients always want a good attitude. It's just passive aggressive BS. I can't stand it. And I feel like there's this like hatred between young Zoomer workers and the older people, because we know that the older people are going to retire to Social Security. They've already been able to like buy a house when it was cheap and it's 5x'd in value. And we're over here fighting for our lives just to keep our jobs in an economy that sucks. And
so this is again the stark reality, the generational divide, right? We've all got to deal with passive aggressive Karens at work. I really think there's a different reality between generations. partly, like I say, but also between genders. I think men are really getting the short end of the stick and not treated too well, not only in corporate environments, unless they're in very senior roles already. And women are getting favorable treatment, as I've covered in some of my videos, around feminism and then hiring and promotion benefits. And also, I mean, I don't want to hop too much on the Karen meme, Karen. I'm sure many of you are familiar, but the Karen meme of these kind of affluent white female liberals, right? I'm sure some of you might be watching, you might relate to some of my content, but there is an element of like favoritism in favor of that group, right? And I think if you're a part of any other demographic and you're objectively looking at the social dynamics at your workplace, maybe a young white man, a black woman, an Asian man or woman, I think it's kind of, there's a bit of a consensus that is unspoken that there is favoritism towards the AWFL, which is the affluent white female liberal. And awful, or AWFL, not saying they're all awful, but there's an acronym that Scott Greer, who's a Republican in America, came up with, that they do receive some favorable treatment. And he's giving this case of this kind of middle-aged affluent white female liberal, talking down to him in a passive-aggressive way. You can sense that he's kind of detached from the job, disaffected and disillusioned. But she's like, you got to be super enthusiastic and happy to do your job. And it's like, of course he's not going to be that motivated to do his job when he's dealing with these type of, completely bizarre social dynamics. And, that demographic I mentioned, AWFL, they tend to dominate middle management. They tend to have been the major beneficiaries of DEI, of diversity, equality, inclusion, and gender equality. Because you tend to see these, and I'm going to say this as nice as I can, these middle-aged white men who are in middle management, and sometimes they do have a very friendly working relationship with white women in their early 20s who coincidentally deal with this fast track to promotions, go through one layer after the other, and be some of the youngest people promoted to senior levels, middle management levels tend to be white women, right? And I've seen it time and time again from many companies I worked at. I don't want to name any specific companies, but I've been working in the finance industry for over 10 years at some of these companies, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, HSBC, and so on, in investment banking. And I've seen that. It's kind of a common pattern, right? And then there's a whole power dynamic that they have over the other workers, men and women, right? Including this guy. And it creates there is a bit of social tension there where it's like, she can have that attitude with you. You can't have that attitude with her, or you'll be considered not a team player, or whatever corporate wording they have for you being difficult to work with. They'll make up some narrative like that to get rid of you. And there's this detachment because they don't understand. They've had a very easy life experience. They've had everything been pandering to them. All culture, girl boss, girl power, things like that, that type of narrative. They've had the whole system pandering to them the whole life. Only now with, RP, red pill content, things like that, you see a bit of pushback against feminism, a bit of pushback against this favoritism they've received, because other demographics are really feeling the strain, like we're carrying the burden of you on our back, and then you're giving us attitude. Like, people are losing their patience for that demographic, and you're going to see this type of social tension not only pick up with politics, with left and right wing men and women being opposite ends and things like that. You're going to see it in the workplace too, and I can sense it under the layers that people are getting a bit fed up of putting up with this double standard.
Older brothers, friends, if you're isolated like a lot of young guys are, you're pretty much screwed. Unless you got like a degree in computer science or a master's degree, you're not going to get hired based on what you can do. You're usually going to be hired based on who you know, who's going to be willing to vouch for you. And nobody will tell you that. There's so many things in college and high school that I thought were so freaking important that don't matter at all. Your GPA, unless you're going to grad school, the difference in like a couple A's and B's compared to like B's and C's, it's pretty much nothing if you have somebody that will vouch for you at the company. If you can act like you know what you're talking about in the interview, just sheer confidence will get you so far in this current day economy, because pretty much everything's like a house of cards. It's all fake. It's all corporate pieces moving around. And
so here's the important thing, because there are many isolated men, and I know part of my audience is that, right? And I think they are getting the short end of the stick. They might not be in all the social events where, like I say, other demographics might be, if they're from an upper middle class background, they went to some of these prestigious institutions like Harvard, Yale, MIT, things like that, Oxford, Cambridge in the UK. So if you're not in some of those circles, it can be difficult to get those jobs. You're kind of thinking that you're going to work hard and succeed on the basis of that. That's not how it works. You should try to network if you want some of those top jobs. And it's very difficult for me to accept, and for many people out there to accept, is that you're kind of, it is a social game more than an academic game. You might have studied hard and done well in your studies, but then in the workplace, it's all about social dynamics and not about, how good quality work you do. And then, other things that they tell you matters don't matter. Like you were saying, your GPA, in many cases, as your career progresses, the university you went to, the degree you have, your grades, your ability to work quite effectively, that's not what matters. It's kind of who you know, not what you know, right? And this social game is quite important, as he's mentioning towards the end of that clip. When it comes to being in the workplace and essentially, or being in job interviews and being confident, there's many times you've got to blag it, which is, blag is a term, or bluff your way. Blag is UK slang for bluffing. You've got to bluff your way in a lot of interviews. If you've worked at a company, you've done a slightly small part of a project, then you can kind of exaggerate a bit, your job interviews, act like you've done more than you have. You can be because so much in the workplace is based on social dynamics, being confident in the workplace, even if you don't know what you're doing and you're kind of bluffing and blagging your way through it, that's very important. Playing the social game is everything in the office. It's not the academic game, right? And I noticed that something myself, going from LSE, which is a good university in the UK, London School of Economics. It's like going to a Harvard or Yale, things like that in the US, or maybe not exactly at that level, but similar. And then working at some of these top banks and things like that in the finance industry, they do kind of have a completely different dynamic in terms of, how important it is to be social and not to be someone who's just smart and good at their job.
There's like a quiet quitting phenomena. The reason is the risk reward is not there anymore. We know we're not going to own houses. How am I going to own a house on a 50 grand salary? Houses in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live, are like 300, 400 grand at cheapest. And that's like a crappy house near the hood. I'm barely getting by. Just like living expenses, rent, food, stuff like that. How am I supposed to afford saving up money for a wedding ring, saving up money for a house? I'm also extremely lucky where I know I'm going to inherit a couple.
So that's quite important, and that's what I try to help people through when I do provide career coaching. There's a link in the description if you want to speak with me directly. And people are really rethinking all these things, and there's some difficult decisions everyone has to make, some real serious sacrifices. If you are in the middle class and you do realize you won't be able to live a middle class lifestyle. And what do I mean by that? You might have to decide you don't want to get married or have kids, maybe because it comes with those costs, or you don't want to buy a big house, things like that. You might have to live in those lower income areas that you thought you'd avoided being in the middle class. So there's some real difficult decisions people need to make. And this system, and particularly the management in this system, the baby boomers, the middle management, things like that, people who completely detach from the reality of most people, of most men, they don't understand, why are these guys detached from work? Why don't they want to work? Why don't they want to come to our work social events? Go to a work social event and say a political opinion that you don't agree with and get cancelled, or deal with a false accusation from a woman and then ruin my career? Go to work and get taxed 40% and can't afford a wife and kids? This system doesn't seem to get it. Like, you're not gonna, how can I say this nicely, maintain social stability over the longer term and have such a broad group of disaffected, disillusioned men.
By totem pole, like the Zoomer men for the most part. We don't get raises at our jobs because we're white guys who don't have any sort of diversity, inclusion, anything like that. We're not going to be able to retire. We're going to be trying to dig the U.S. out of the massive debt that the boomer economy put us in. We're going to have taxes all throughout the next 20 years that are going to be ripping stuff from us to give to, people of color that are trans and everything like that. Just BS, like immigration taxes, BS liberal hyper woke taxes. And that's already happening. Like, people say like that's a conspiracy theory. That is happening.
So, like I say, a lot of your tax money is getting wasted. If you're a hardworking, productive, competent man or woman, in many cases, there might be DEI things that disadvantage you on the basis of your race or your gender. There are many men who are, like I say, are getting disillusioned with why do we have to carry the burden of the entire society on our backs and get the least from it, right? And that's what the system doesn't seem to acknowledge. You're going to have many competent men who have skills dropping out your system, putting in less effort at work. They're like, why should I put in the same effort as a woman when she's going to get favorable hiring and promotion benefits, as I covered in some of my recent videos? Then you have the burden of debt of, whether it's a mortgage, student loan debt, paying off high taxes for the government debt. Then you have all these, okay, you're working hard, and who's reaping the benefits? Like I say, at workplace, it might be liberal, feminist, the woke agenda, the baby boomer generation, the older generation. When you're paying your taxes, who's reaping the benefits? It could be migrants coming across the border who are living in fancy hotels, who are being given, free housings, massive government benefits to raise their 6 kids, and you can't afford to have 1 kid. And the key point of this video, and the key point of what I'm trying to say, is eventually this passive disillusionment of massive groups, millions of working age, military age men, that passive disillusionment will eventually spill out to something else, right? And maintaining social stability, you're not going to be able to keep this guy in a passive state for his life. What you're going to do, expect him to play video games and smoke something and just play video games and drink on the weekends. Eventually he's going to get fed up, his friends will get fed up, and it's going to lead to social instability. Do you get me? And it's not a good idea to have this many young men or young people in general with nothing to do, right? Nothing to live for, essentially. What, living for work? Living to play the next new video game, to watch the new Netflix show, to potentially get married and then deal with a difficult situation there, such as a high rate of divorce. It's not going to end well. That's all I can say. It's not going to end well. It's kind of clear why nobody wants to work anymore. There's no real incentive. You're not really living your life beyond. If you work hard and get a 5 to 10K pay rise, it's not going to change your life dramatically. You can invest it, maybe so you can retire early. You're not going to be able to buy a massive house in many cases for most people, and do many of the basic things you could do in previous generations. So it's no surprise people like this are disillusioned. And in order to survive this, as I mentioned in my recent video, you need to be highly skilled. Lots of people are not going to make it. Lots of people are going to get crushed by the system, by the inflation, pushed from the middle class to the lower class. You have to be, in order to survive, and this is what I try to do with my career coaching, is help people find something unique that works for them. You need to be highly skilled so you can survive the ups and downs of the economy. You need to be a minimalist, good at saving and investing so you can have your financial freedom from the system. You have to somewhat be isolated, and I don't mean be completely isolated from the world, but learn how to separate yourself from like toxic social dynamics, office politics, this kind of political agenda being pushed at work. You have to be a kind of financial samurai and be super disciplined in maneuvering through, like I say, whether it's saving, investing, lifestyle choices, lifestyle design. And these are things I try to incorporate into my career advice and career coaching. So there's a link in the description if you want to speak with me directly, and I've helped many clients. I'll be happy to help you too. And leave a comment below and let me know what you think about, if you don't want to work anymore, why is that? And do you relate to this example we have here of this individual? Thanks for listening. There are 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, and I'll see you next time.